And that's exactly what he did. The actual axle snapped, and the wheel stayed attached to the hub, and it was rolling around. Dick Skemmel was the Toto Wolff, Christian Horner of Team Lotus in the late 60s. So we're thinking sort of 67 through 72, okay? But before then, he was just a regular one of the boys. He was one of the mechanics. And he started at Lotus when he was 19 years old. Now, I was fortunate enough to go to the first ever speaking engagement Dick ever did. And he got up there, and his wife was there, and it was so funny. And he said he was coerced to do it. And he said, I don't know how interesting I'm going to be. In fact, you probably think I'm going to be really boring. The man spoke for 3.5 hours, and the stories that came out of that man's mouth was just so funny. And I'm going to actually tell you a couple of them, because the ones that really stuck out in my mind, and they're not in any book. Someone has said we should write a book, and he should totally write a book. Okay, so to set this up, the old man is Colin Chapman. And for those people who don't know who Colin Chapman is the engineer who engineered all the cars of Lotus. He is the owner. He's the founder. He is one of Britain's greatest engineers. There's plenty of YouTube videos on Colin Chapman. Go check him out. If you don't know, it helps so you know who he is for these stories. But he is the owner of the company. And he was a very pragmatic kind of a guy. He was ex-RAF. He was so he was very militaristic, and he ran his company like a military. But it was very team-oriented, but he was the head of the team. So he was the kind of guy who'd be like, you, and you go do this. You, and you go do this. And he had such charisma that he just did it. People just did it, right? He barked orders, basically. And the story is they were going to the Team Lotus was going to the French Grand Prix, and Dick Skemmel was a 19-year-old mechanic. And this is 1962 with the Lotus 25. There's a couple of pictures of it around, I'm sure. Yeah, we've seen pictures of the Lotus 25. It's one of the famous cars. The Lotus 25 wins the Glover Cup at the Castle Combe Revival every year, or not Castle Combe, Goodwood Revival. So the Lotus 25 wins the Glover Cup every year at the Goodwood Revival because it's just that good a racing car. First ever monocoque chassis, Formula One car, Coventry Climax V8 engine in the back, Jim Clark driving, great car. Well, they were going to the French Grand Prix, and there's a photograph of the Bedford truck out in the kitchen. So they load the car up on the Bedford truck. Now the Bedford truck, they hated it because it was constantly breaking down. It was not a very reliable thing. They beat it up. It was dragged from everywhere. The mechanics, yeah, they're mechanics, but they were spending all their time working on the racing cars. They could give a damn about the Bedford truck. So they loaded it up, and in those days they used to take the ferry from Norfolk across. No, it wasn't Norfolk then. They weren't in Norfolk then. But they used to take the ferry across, and once they got across the ferry, they were going to the French Grand Prix, the Bedford truck broke down. So it's the team, so it's a bunch of guys, so 5 or 6 guys in a Bedford truck with 2 racing cars trying to fix this Bedford truck. Well, Colin Chapman, or the old man, says, you guys go off in the Bedford truck, I'll follow along in a couple of hours, I'll get the next, in 4 or 5 hours, I'll get the next ferry, and he always used to bring his Ford Zephyr estate, with a 2-car trailer, an empty 2-car trailer on the back. So the 2-car trailer showed up 4 hours later, rolls up, right, what's wrong with it now? And they explained, he goes, well, we're late now. It's late. We're not going to make it on time. If we're going to wait around, we have to be at scrutineering by this time tomorrow, or this time today, or wherever it was. Right. You and you start working on the Bedford. You and you get the cars off the transporter and put them on the back of the trailer, on the Zephyr. And then he points at Dick. You go get a lug wrench and make sure you check every single lug nut on that trailer. Make sure they're tight, good and tight. Well, there's a reason for this. They were late to another race, and they had to put the cars on the back of the Zephyr. And as they were driving to the track, the lug nuts came off the wheel, and the trailer lost its wheel. And so Chapman's solution to this was make sure that it was tight. Didn't want the wheels falling off. It was too critical. So Dick, check the lug nuts. All right, and then he went, right, you're with me. So Dick, who had only been working for Lotus for a couple of months, is now sitting in the passenger seat with the owner, traveling down to the French Grand Prix, pre-motorway. Now you got to remember, there's no motorways in these days. There's no big French motorways. It's all small, windy little roads through villages. Imagine if you were traveling from, well, we live in Plymouth. Say you were going to Plymouth to Bristol, but you had to stay on the A38 the entire time. There is no M5. Or if you're in a different part of the country, say you live in Bristol and you're trying to get to London, and all you have to do is travel on the A4. So you're going through all the little towns, right? That's what they were doing. And every time they stopped for petrol, Dick, get out and check those lug nuts. Check the lug nuts. Check the lug nuts. Now, Colin Chapman was known for being an engineer, but he was also a bloody good driver. Now, here's a tangent story to what this is. They used to go testing in Silverstone or Snetterton and everything like that. And whenever they had a brand new car, for example, the 25, they go test the 25, and Jim Clark would get in the car, drive the car, and say, it can't get around Beckett's. It just won't get around that corner. It's just, I can't make it do that time. It's worse than last year's car. Oh, it's awful. Colin Chapman used to take his sport coat off, hand it to a mechanic, get in the car with his tie on, no helmet, go out, drive the car around the track, do a better time than Jim Clark, and say, nothing wrong with the car will do it, get in there, you're just being a wimp. He was a bloody good driver, right? He could have been like a Jack Brabham or a Bruce McLaren, a owner of a company that made a Formula One car he could have won a championship. That's the theory. But, so, Colin Chapman's barreling down these French roads because it can't be late for scrutineering. Every time they're stopping, Dick's jumping up, checking the lug nuts on the trailer. They go around corners, they meet French tractors, slam on their brakes. And then they are about 20 miles away from the track. They were going through, and they went around this steep corner, and all of a sudden they hear bonk, dunk, 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 and the rear wheel starts to pass them from the trailer. Now, Colin Chapman was quite upset and quite angry, but Dick did say, to my credit, the lug nuts were still on when he broke the axle on the trailer. And that's exactly what he did. The actual axle snapped, and the wheel stayed attached to the hub, and it was rolling around. Colin Chapman, driving like a maniac, broke the axle on a trailer, hauling 2 Lotus 25s. So, what do you do now? You can't trailer it. The trailer's actually broken. You can't even put a new wheel on it. It needs welding. It's broken. So Chapman went, right, get the cars off the trailer. You're in that one. I'm in this one. They got into the car. They started it up. And they ended up driving the 2 Lotus 25s to the track on French roads. Through towns. People were out there looking at them. They drove the car to the track. I just love that story, and apparently it happened quite a bit in the '60s when they were, especially when they were at the Silverstone, at Silverstone. If they had to do any major work on the car overnight, they would do all their work in Towster, which is a little town just outside of Silverstone. And they never bothered putting it on a trailer and taking it to this garage that they've been using. They would just drive the car. They would just literally get in the car and drive it the 5 miles from Silverstone to this little garage, do the work on it, and then they would just drive it back. Because that's what it was back in the 60s.